Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Oh dear. Okay, well, here goes. Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, June 14th, 2022. Time for another show, regardless of how prepared or not prepared I am for it. The morning tweet has gone out, and there's nothing I can do about it. The Kagro in the Morning Show is live now, and Kagro X, by direction of Bill in Portland, Maine, recaps yesterday's subcommittee action, totally not inebriated. That's the way we're trying to do it. Sort of. But, just to stand in opposition to Rudy Giuliani, I will not be dyeing my hair. I may be sweating bullets. That's possible. Flop sweat possible at any time here. And then, of course, morning drinking. Probably just out of the question for our show. Although, maybe we'll try it sometime. I mean, it didn't work very well for Rudy. That's true. But maybe he's just terrible at these things, as he is at many things. Well, no hearings today, so I guess I could start day drinking at any point. It really wouldn't damage things too much. It is, it's Tuesday, so no hearing today. Tomorrow they resume, and, only 25 hours to go until they reconvene, and so we'll have to figure out some way of passing the time between now and then, because it's all the excitement in our lives, these hearings. Yesterday's hearing... I didn't get to watch, of course, from 10 to 11, but I caught what went on between 11 and, I don't know, how long did they go? Did they go, I forget, 12:30 or so? I don't think it was nothing major yesterday that I was able to catch. Lots of witness testimony and, of course, the big excitement of Bill Stepien. I think they were pronouncing his name as Stepien. Not present yesterday. And well wishes from the members of the committee, so I guess everybody's buying the story that his wife was in labor. Sounds like a conspiracy theory to me. But anyway, I don't know. They had his videotape testimony. I guess they made do with that. And interesting development that I did catch yesterday, and there's probably more, but the hint of a different direction, slightly different direction. I'm sure it was planned, and it's part of their now 7-part conspiracy thing that they're laying out here. But an excellent point, and it scored some points here at home with the production staff as well, which was essentially that one of the motivations that Team Trump had for perpetuating the big lie was, as I think Zoe Lofgren put it, Lofgren, am I right? Yeah, Lofgren, right? All of a sudden, as I'm saying her name, and it is Zoe, I think she says Zoe Lofgren, and then I'm like, Lofgren? Like Nils Lofgren? Yeah, have I got everything confused here? No, I believe that's right. They're not all part of the same big musical family, though. At any rate, as she was laying it out and calling it the big ripoff that she hung the label on? I mean, doesn't really roll off the tongue the same way the big lie does, but we're used to the big lie. Big ripoff seems fine. Everyone will understand what it means. But that rang a bell with, like I said, with the home-based production staff yesterday. Like, that's really something. You can't, perhaps, the elements of the crime that you're seeking to charge Trump or others with requires demonstration of a state of mind, a intent to defraud. And you can never tell with Trump because, again, you're mind reading, and Trump doesn't really have much reading material there. It's difficult to tell whether he's an evil genius or a complete idiot, and I think that's partially intentional, which leans towards the evil genius explanation. But it's hard to credit him with genius when he's such a dope. Even when he thinks he's being scheming and smart, he's dopey. So it's very difficult to know. My takeaway from it initially was, this is where it rises to the level of a different kind of a problem. If you are trying to charge somebody with routine wire fraud and you're trying to, or whatever, some crime where you have to show that they understood that this was a crime and intended to commit it, versus having some genuine belief that what they were doing was not wrong. And I don't know whether that really helps with very many crimes, but apparently it helps with this one. And at any rate, I do think there's some point at which you should be able to tell the jury, whether it's in a real courtroom or in the court of public opinion, well, look, he may or may not have totally understood this. He may or may not have totally believed his own big lie. I guess the excuse runs, well, if he really and truly believed that the election was being stolen, then, almost anything is justifiable. If you're thinking, if in your mind you're preserving the constitutional republic somehow, you fool yourself into believing that, then wouldn't it stand to reason that X, Y, Z? Well, maybe, but then don't break into the Capitol, smash out the windows, and smear feces on the wall. That's just really, show me in the Constitution where it says you can do that, I guess. But I guess the idea is that you're supposed to consider the possibility that he or some of the rioters or all of the rioters truly believe this stuff. Then the question, all right, well, should that matter? Well, if the elements of the crime says that it does matter, then it's difficult to win in court. But on the other hand, at some point you should be able to say, this is the President of the United States. We ought to be able to expect that he understands what reality is versus what it's not, whether or not what he is required to do to preserve the constitutional order in his mind is so unreasonable to the average and reasonable juror, essentially, that you just need to rule out the plans that you're thinking of executing. I'm sorry, this just doesn't work out. It's just, there's no way to lawfully pursue these goals. And quite honestly, if you sit down and think about it, any reasonable person would see that these stupid conspiracies that you're coming up with one after the other can't possibly work. They don't even work together. And we, for better or for worse, we do expect a higher standard of the leader of the free world, as we like to call the President of the United States, and that maybe you really ought to have backed off earlier than you did. But even if that doesn't do it for you, and you can't get your mind around the idea, well, he thought he was preserving the constitutional order. It's not so much that he was doing this to hold on to personal power. You might convince yourself if you were a Trump fan. He was trying to preserve our usual system of government from being stolen, which he really believed, and therefore, even though something and remaining in office past January 20th isn't in the cards constitutionally, it's better than handing it over to a fraudster. If you totally believe that, how does that sit with you? And then, if you just can't prove that he actually knew that he was simply stealing the election, then, this was the part that I said rang a bell here at home, you could always discuss the fact that it was extraordinarily lucrative to spread the big lie. And that even if you didn't necessarily believe that you were right in trying to preserve actually, if you didn't believe that he was out of his mind trying to preserve his presidency and therefore the constitutional order, you might still come to the conclusion that it was worth so much money that he couldn't stop telling the big lie. And that would be another motivation and an easy motive to believe for somebody like Donald Trump. Even if you're a Trump fan, the idea of raking in millions of dollars obviously would appeal to him, and I think you know that. So that's an entirely different angle on things, and makes it entirely possible to, I think, perhaps, I don't know whether that would hold up in as a motive for the charges which we've been considering to date, or whether there are new charges like wire fraud or something like that for all the money that they raised online and having people send in via credit card, and all the stupid tricks that they pulled too, like having people sign up thinking that they were giving cash at one-time donation to help stop the steal, and then it turns out that they were being enrolled to donate the same amount weekly for 100 years or whatever the hell it was. There's a lot of elements to that as well. But that was a really interesting angle to say, if you don't believe in the big lie, big steal theory of things, then you might consider the big ripoff angle instead. So that was something of it wasn't exactly a revelation. We knew that he was doing this and that he was raising money off of it. But for some people, it was probably the first time that they actually heard about this. So, Anyway, very interesting. Also, I happened to see circulating just now on Twitter, though it happened about an hour ago, that it was circulated by Jonathan Karl of, where is he? ABC News? I don't even remember these guys one at a time. Okay, yeah, ABC News, with photos from his book, Betrayal. Again, everybody's got a book, but interesting spin. He's circulating this particular photo and saying that there are more. These photos, which were published exclusively in Betrayal, show the scene at the White House on election night. Look at the faces. These people did not think they were winning. That is important and interesting, too, as a lot of yesterday's testimony and narrative building was about disproving the idea that there was a genuine belief that they had won and that they were startled that everything was being stolen from them. Now, on election night, remember, the theory is supposed to be that Trump and his team fully believe that they're winning and that all the counting should stop. I mean, the truth is, they were screaming stop the count because they knew that continuing to count would cost them the election, and that's why they were screaming about it. But their claim is that was because all of the additional counting was fraudulent. And obviously everyone would wake up to the fraud, but still, so you would think that there would be some jubilation, some joy, some smiles on the faces of the people in these pictures, not these knitted brows and concerned looks. They might be concerned, maybe this is the moment where they told them that they were going to be faking all of the ballots and bringing them in and printing them in China and taking them out by the suitcase full and stuffing the ballot boxes. And that's what has them concerned. But surely they must have believed in their cause and the rightness of their cause and the fact that they were winning overwhelmingly at that point. You'd think there would be a little bit more celebration going on. So I think Jonathan Karl has an excellent point there. Perhaps that will be illustrated in some of the upcoming hearings. But some progress made yesterday at any rate. And that's, I think, largely good news. All right, well, let's see. We can set the machine back on, bring us more stuff now, and see what comes through. Oh, look at this. Is that right? Okay, well, just by way of news, gotta laugh, tweeting out the news from where? I don't know. It doesn't matter. U.S. President Joe Biden, did you realize he was the U.S. President? Will visit the Middle East from July 13th to July 16th, and the trip will include a visit to Israel and the West Bank, according to senior administration officials. So, large security issues on tap for the White House there. And state visit, I guess, or I don't know. At any rate, that's news, and I don't think he'll be getting $2 billion for his private equity fund anytime soon, but it can be a very lucrative thing if you're that kind of person touring the Middle East. All right, well, it's news, and we'll count it as such. Should I have put that aside? I mean, I don't know. Do we really need the tweet? I'll put it there just so I can prove to you that I didn't make the whole thing up. That's really it. Sometimes that's all I'm doing, trying to provide you with these links. Okay, let's see. Other things. Why don't we, like I said, set the machine back to tell me what's going on at the moment. It gave me another thing to think about, of course. Another good point. Somebody said, I had not given this any thought, and there was a similar reaction out here. Just a regular person, just like you and me out there, by the name of Kevin 6 with 2 X's in it. Kevin 613. I imagine there's something going on here with that 613. But anyway, he happens to have tweeted this appropriate response here, or He says, remember when Flight 93, you of course remember September 11th, Flight 93 that was forced to the ground and crashed in Pennsylvania. Remember when Flight 93 gave their lives to protect the Capitol? Oh, yes. That's why they ended up crashing. And 20 years later, Trump supporters attacked the Capitol. That's a good point. And as it happens, Philadelphia G, another just regular person like you and me, not affiliated with any professional outlet or otherwise, I don't think, who says, oh yeah, we forgot. We said we would never forget, and then we did forget. I'm not sure I have heard anybody until now invoke Flight 93 and all of this. Now, in reaction to the tweet itself, there are several people who say, of course, I thought the same thing, or I said the same thing. So, yeah, there are lots of us out there who have had that thought. It didn't occur to me, so I was more in sync with the, oh gosh, we never said we'd never forget, and then we did forget. We, of course, haven't forgotten about Flight 93, but that's an interesting parallel, right? There were people who gave their lives to protect. I don't know if they knew that the target was the Capitol, but they knew that it was Washington, D.C., and they knew what was happening with the planes. And they did, in fact, make that last-ditch effort, knowing that they could, in fact, crash the plane and kill them all. But they thought it was more important to try and do that and prevent the bigger tragedy of hitting Washington, D.C. And, the investigation into 9/11, of course, came up with the idea, I guess. And I don't know whether they got some testimony on it from that so-called 19th hijacker who was in their custody, Zacharias Moussaoui, I believe, and figured out that the Capitol was, in fact, the target. But that's the popular understanding anyway. But yeah, imagine that, right? Sacrificing your life for knowing somebody, or being a family member of someone who had sacrificed their lives, fighting the terrorists on Flight 93 to keep the Capitol safe, only to have Trump supporters turn around 20 years later and sack the Capitol and try to destroy it themselves. That's pretty deep. So, anyway, that was on my mind this morning. Back to Pocket and what's going on elsewhere, both on Twitter and at Daily Kos. Of course, it being Tuesday, we expect in our last segment perhaps to hear from Joan McCarter. I hate hedging on it, but I know the reality of things is with a flurry of activity always going on, and especially with the move, etc. On top of that, plus all the hearings that are going on, though there's no hearings today, just circumstances frequently conspire against us. And I don't want to overpromise and say, Joan absolutely positively will be here. And I guess I should check with her, beforehand each night to remind you, it's Tuesday. But then I hate doing that because it's like, what, don't I trust Joan to know when it... Well, sure, I do. And sometimes we screw things up. That's true, too. So it would be just a reminder. I don't know. Anyway, like I said, there's plenty going on. She's got a life of her own, by the way. She doesn't owe it to us to be here every single time at our beck and call. We just always enjoy talking to her. So the hope is that it will happen. Let's see. Oh, I need to issue a correction from yesterday. Let's see. Let me see if I can bring up the note that I got. And I think there's a link to a story about it, as our Daily Kos pal, SF Bay Transplant, frequent correspondent via Daily Kos Mail, pointed out yesterday. I think in the flurry of lightning round activity yesterday when Greg mentioned, I don't know how we got around to it. But anyway, I think I blurted out in the middle. Oh, yes, right. Right, that was it. It was the Proud Boys and the other weirdo militias, since we were talking about the Patriot Front being arrested in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and mentioning increase in Proud Boy activity and numbers, allegedly, following January 6th and various other publicity opportunities for them, but that they had burst in somewhere to break up one of the drag queen story time events happening at a local public library, which, again, I guess they're going on in various places. I mean, this has become a thing, and I don't really know how it became a thing. I guess the first time it became a thing, somebody did it for the hell of it, and then it made news because everybody was like, oh my god, drag queen story hour, and that's somehow inappropriate and terrible. And although I did say, why are they? Well, and the bottom line is, well, some people like reading to kids and it's fun, and some of the people who like to do that, I guess, are also into drag. And honestly, if you put the two of them together and everything goes right, then, all right, that's not a big deal. They're not, but of course the right-wing fear is they're brainwashing the kids. They're recruiting them. They're grooming them somehow by wearing a wig while they read them the story. To the kids, there's the story. And, well, the person who read the story might have looked different or funny even to them, but they don't, kids get stories read to them by people in clown suits, I think, with some frequency. So it doesn't really matter. And, of course, there's no drag show or anything that goes along with it. However, it did make me wonder, well, why are you going through the trouble, I guess. But in terms of, wouldn't it be easier to just show up and read the story, more rather than put on the whole get-up? But, well, one, they like to. And so I guess they don't consider it a chore. And two, that adds the interest. Just Joe coming and reading the story, did the kids care? But they don't care about it in terms of if the person showed up the next week in a clown suit, they would probably say, hey, a different clown is reading. I hate to say that, but it might be the case that 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds might consider drag to be something like a clown outfit. And while you might expect different from adults and you might expect better and the better understanding of what's going on from adults, these are kids. But to them, it might make no difference whatsoever. It's just a funny set of clothing to them, which might not be what the drag queens themselves are going for. But I think what they're basically going for is, this is the way I'm comfortable. Kids don't care. And it might not be a bad thing if we showed kids that people who enjoy drag also enjoy just entertaining children for the heck of it, and there's no ulterior motive whatsoever. Kids are nice. It's fun to see them smile. I can read. They can't. Some of them can by that age. They just want to hear a story, and why not do it in a way that makes them say, I have nothing to fear from people who dress this way. Right. Okay, so it makes a certain amount of sense. But then it exploded, of course. The backlash against it probably helped motivate other people in other cities to say, we should do this. At any rate, they came to break one up, and I think I mentioned offhandedly that it might have been in Florida, because Florida Man, I just figured, oh, what the hell? It's probably in Florida. Proud Boy activity apparently is way up in Florida as well, but it wasn't. It was actually in the San Francisco Bay Area, which carries with it its own meaning. Of course, the Proud Boys, taking root there or nearby, and then going and making a menace of themselves inside San Francisco or that area. And then, of course, confronting somebody in what would ordinarily probably be considered something of a safe space for this activity, probably was meant to shake them up. But I got the place wrong. And in addition, SF Bay, San Francisco Bay Transplant, sent me a Daily Kos piece on it, front page piece up. Got our pop-ups to deal with, of course, as we all do. From, let's see, Aisha Kamar has written this piece, and the story is, police say Proud Boys harassed children. That's not a good thing to do. And interrupted the organizer of the Drag Queen Story Hour. Is it an hour? I don't know. Are they overselling it? Maybe. Can we charge them with fraud? Probably not, unless they knew that it was not going to go an hour and advertised it as an hour regardless. Now, there's a crime. All right, what's up in this situation? As June marks the celebration of Pride, extra sense made of doing this currently now and in June, but they do this year round. Not all Americans are open to celebrating diversity and acceptance. For the second time this weekend, was there another one in Florida? I better read. Second time this weekend, an LGBTQ plus event was targeted by men involved with a hate group, authorities said. In a Facebook post Sunday, the Alameda County Sheriff's Office in California said it opened a hate crime investigation into an incident that occurred on Saturday at the San Lorenzo Library. And I'm gathering that that's a San Francisco area thing, but it doesn't ring any bells, San Lorenzo. But I'm an East Coaster and always have been. According to the office, at least 5 men who are allegedly members of the Proud Boys, that's not a whole lot of them either, barged into an edition of Drag Queen Story Hour. Police officials noted the men wore clothes with logos belonging to the white nationalist hate group. According to NBC News, they even shouted homophobic and transphobic slurs at the event organizer. Great for kids, by the way. A statement from Sheriff's Lieutenant Ray Kelly said. Coming up on our break here. These men were described as extremely aggressive. That's what they liked about themselves, I think. With a threatening, violent demeanor causing people to fear for their safety, Kelly said. And he added that deputies de-escalated the situation. Thankfully, finally, they're de-escalating things. What a surprise. Before anyone was hurt, but no arrests were made at the scene. He noted that the Alameda County Sheriff's Office is not only investigating the incident as a hate crime, but also investigating the annoying and harassing of children. I guess really annoyance. I don't know, but the annoying. Don't annoy the children. Anyway, the event was hosted by Kyle Chu, a drag queen known professionally as Panda Dulce. You always gotta love those names. Dulce shared what happened during the incident on their Instagram page. I'm getting the pronouns that are here. Their Instagram page, noting that the disruption totally freaked out all the kids. Well, congratulations, Proud Boys.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. 2 bits of breaking news to throw in here. One, we get the thumbs up from Joan McCarter, who says, yeah, I should be there. Everything should be a go for today, and that's great. And I always feel it's making me feel bad about this whole thing. I try to hedge the bets just so that I don't get everybody's hopes up or whatever. And I'm trying to say, look, I realize that things happen, and you gotta allow for all of that. And then every once in a while, I'm reminded, this makes it sound like you don't believe things are going to happen. And I'm just saying, I'm human, and I know that you sometimes do this, and it's okay. And, all right. Well, anyway, I should just shut up about it and get on with the story. Breaking news number 2, though, that will get in the way of things just for a moment. I see Greg retweeting this. Hugo Lowell, who's got a blue check mark of his own, which means he's from, I don't know these things, The Guardian, congressional reporter for The Guardian. And he says that just in is news from the January 6th committee that says that the hearing scheduled for tomorrow, that we are also excited about, and we're counting down the hours to, has been postponed. No explanation given at the moment, but then Greg adds that Zoe Lofgren says that committee videographers need more time. They have to make more clips of Jared Kushner admitting his guilt and queuing them up. It takes some time to get all of that done so that it's ready, so that when you give your presentation and you can say just offhandedly, let's play clip 8. The right clip plays and it's the right length, and they have all those hours of testimony to sift through. All right, so I was thinking maybe we'll read through the rest of this piece at Daily Kos about the disruption of the Drag Queen Story Hour, because there's a couple other points to be made about this. So Kyle Chu, who performs as Panda Dulce, says, I'm safe, that's fine, nothing happened to me. I get protests and threatening letters every once in a while all the time, but as he says, today hit different. The county librarian shared a similar recollection and noted how afraid the children were. So the Proud Boys, once again, nothing to be proud of, the way they handle things. I know they love confrontation, but they frighten the children. And I'm sure that they think, well, the drag queens frighten the children even more. And the truth is that they just don't. And that's because the people reading the stories are treating the kids in actually the most normal way. They're sitting down and reading them a story quietly in the children's section of the public library, not dressing up in uniform. They're dressing up in their own way, individually. That's one of the fun things about the drag queens, is they all are pretty individualistic. But then these guys dressing up in all the same outfits and making it look like a uniform, which is, kind of scary in its own right. But then busting up what the kids wanted, which was the stories, and threatening to escalate to violence, and that makes kids upset. They're there for a story. A story is being told, and now the story is being interrupted by loud people who are threatening violence. That's not going to win the kids over. Anyway, as the librarian was saying, it was all in front of the children and it frightened them. This is County Librarian Cindy Chadwick talking to KTVU. We had parents and children there who wanted to come to this event and chose to be there. And to have people come in and try to intimidate those folks and us from trying to do a program like this was just beyond the pale for me. Oh, beyond the pale. It's a troublesome phrase that we should be on alert for. It might be something we need to raise consciousness about, although I might be misinterpreting the whole thing. Anyway, a couple of embedded tweets about the event, including some video, come from Tim Johns, and they are, he too, a check-marked individual, and I guess the local ABC News reporter, perhaps, by the looks of things. And they've had to, they mentioned it, well, you'll see in the embedded tweet, we've blurred, he says, some of the video to hide white power signs and also offensive clothing. So, really pretty interesting that they come in and intimidate everybody, and not only scare the kids, but probably also some more of the trauma probably is if parents try to intervene and say, hey, listen, the kids are just trying to have a story. We chose to come here. This is the way we want to raise our children, and you have no say in this. Get out of here. And then watching their parents get threatened and intimidated by a roving band of thugs was probably no help for the kids either. All right, well, more reporting on this. According to BuzzFeed News, Dulce was able to finish the story, but not until after police escorted the men out, so at least the kids got the story out of it. These kids deserve programming and role models that is accurately reflective of our diverse world, Dulce told BuzzFeed News. Not a regurgitated monolith authored by xenophobes because they're too cowardly to accept reality. The reading was part of the Drag Queen Story Hour, an event created in San Francisco in 2015. So I guess they're the originators of it. While the event in San Lorenzo was open to the public, it encouraged children to be present due to the reading material. After the event was announced, some right-wing Twitter accounts, including Libs of TikTok, increasingly problematic Libs of TikTok, shared it as part of a thread focusing on similar events around the country. While the original tweet was deleted by Twitter due to violations of the site's rules, finally, other tweets about the event were not. Despite the weekend's disturbance, the library stood strong and said it will continue hosting Pride events. Libraries are open to all and are places that foster inclusion of all our communities. Attempts to intimidate and silence others are not tolerated in libraries, the library said in a statement to BuzzFeed News. We are grateful to Panda Dulce for showing bravery and resilience and finishing the storytime event. They were successful in scaring us, but they weren't successful in their ultimate goal, which is to make us go away because of their own discomfort with the diversity of our world. They failed in that, Dulce said, according to ABC News. I'll believe it, even if you don't tell me that it was ABC News that verifies it. Sounds like a good statement. Let's see, another embedded tweet here for you to check out when you check out the story over at Daily Kos. The incident occurred on the same day that 31 members of the white nationalist Patriot Front group were arrested in Idaho on suspicion of planning to start a riot at a Pride event in Idaho. We will make sure that any future events at the library are safe against hate speech and threats of violence, Kelly told KQED. Kelly got around, huh? As we celebrate Pride Month, we will be swift in our response to any incidents where there are threats to harm members of this community. So in the end, everything works out okay. A bit of a scare there for the kids, for the performer, the reader, and the parents and authorities, of course. But I did see, speaking of, problematic things from libs of TikTok, I think we discussed the story a couple of weeks ago, I think. But yeah, increasingly disturbing content from this libs of TikTok person who has been, I think, outed as by real life name and has just gotten more aggressive as a result. I did see over the weekend another one of these stretches from the libs of TikTok person screaming about drag shows with video from a stage performance during a Pride Month event somewhere of I don't know whether they're an organized troupe or just a bunch of individuals that they had, but they were up, dancing to music, and libs of TikTok was outraged, saying this is at a quote family-friendly drag queen performance, which of course to libs of TikTok, and her followers, I think, that's, an oxymoron in their mind. How could there be a family-friendly thing? But anyway, they showed some video of them dancing. I won't say much, except that the dancing, I mean, it's not high quality. They could work on their routine, but, it's not really meant to be a precision show. It's just a demonstration of pride, and they're happy, and that's what it's all about. But what struck me about it was they were dancing, and I guess that libs of TikTok took it to be, one, because it was drag to begin with, it was somehow offensive to them, and two, that it was apparently suggestive either because of the clothing or the manner of dance, and I don't know. To me, it's what struck me, and I figured I'm not going to jump in the middle of this thing. There's too much going on around it anyway, but the reality, honestly, if we were having the discussion about it, either with libs of TikTok or someone like that, honestly, you could see what goes on here at pretty much at any basketball game at halftime. And it doesn't mean you have to go to the NBA either. You could see it at a college game, high school game. Quite honestly, when the dance teams come on, and these moves aren't new or any more or less suggestive than what's going on the basketball court when the dance teams are there. What the difference is that these are men performing in a way that makes you uncomfortable, that is to say, I guess, in drag, and that's what bothers you about it. But honestly, I don't know. I wonder whether maybe they do, libs of TikTok, do they spend their time worrying about what goes on at these like 6-year-old pageants where they have 6-year-old girls doing dance routines like this, and nobody is stopping the parents either, teaching their kids to do crazier and crazier things, and sexualizing these 6-year-olds just by having the pageant at all, for one thing. But the dance moves that they do, or any cheerleading team will do, even when they're underage kids, it happens all the time. You're picking it out because there's members of the LGBTQ plus, I guess, community involved, and you're angry at them. And I understand that you're wrong about it, but I understand why you exhibit this psychosis. But okay, beyond that, there's not much to say about it. But I really, it was something that struck me that this doesn't disturb you if it happens at a basketball game and there's underage girls doing it. And that's wrong in its own right, I guess. Although, one, leave the girls alone. Though, perhaps some of them could use some more discretion about what routines they decide are appropriate. But it's not for me to decide, and I can't paint with a broader brush. I don't know. And I'm not going to sit there and judge the routines either. But I do think it's just plain fact that what was going on the stage wasn't particularly offensive, and like I said, it's very similar to stuff that you could see in public performance anywhere. And there's no Twitter account that I know of dedicated to stoking outrage about it. So okay, let's see. Other fun, somewhat related story I did happen to see today, and I retweeted it without any. I think there was no link in it, but now there's a write-up over at Talking Points Memo about it, that one of the 31 people arrested the other day. Here we go. The story was originally I saw from Raw Story. So let's go with their reporting of it. Travis Geddes had retweeted this thing. Patriot front member kicked out of mom's house following arrest. This is not who I raised, is the quote, except, the reality of it is obviously this is who you raised. I know you are sad about that, and I'm glad you're sad about that. I'm not glad you're sad, but I'm glad you understand that this is a problem. Patriot front member kicked out of mom's house. And, of course, everybody had their picture taken when they were arrested. This particular one, whatever his name is, it's right here. Here's the picture. The mug shot is here. One of the Patriot Front extremists was kicked out of his mother's house after his arrest, with dozens of white nationalists allegedly conspiring to provoke violence at an Idaho LGBTQ plus pride event. It's Travis Geddes' own reporting here that I'm reading over at Raw Story. Karen Amsden, A-M-S-D-E-N, the mother of Jared Michael Boyce, B-O-Y-C-E, told the Daily Beast that her son had struggled since his father left their family years ago and came out as gay. That's interesting. And she said she was going public in hopes of damaging her son's reputation in the group, and finally forcing him to cut ties with white nationalism. It's a aggressive strategy. But yeah, you always want to be supportive of your kids, but not when not when they're involved with white nationalist activity. Maybe this is the tough love move you have to make. And look, I'll be there to support you when you break away, but you're going to have to break away. And what a story too. And I figured there was something going on. I didn't guess that the father had left and come out as gay necessarily, but this happens fairly frequently. I think, especially among the people who are holding themselves up as ultra-rightists and nationalists and protectors of family values, etc. And then you've just happened to notice in the story that mom and son have different surnames, and you say, well, that's pretty indicative of a departure at some point from traditional values. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But it's interesting that maybe that's part of it too, is that they're so distraught at the failure to live up to what they think are American values and traditional values. They're so upset with themselves or the failure around them to live up to this ideal that they join in these groups to, somehow make up for what they see as the shortcomings themselves or their family members or whatever. There's some intense psychology around it, no doubt, but I can't diagnose it from afar. I can simply say the theory would make sense to me. At any rate, mom goes on to say, I would love to do whatever I can to out him as a Patriot Front member so that he can't be a part of it, Amsden said, and they had to include that in brackets, as a Patriot Front member. Because remember, Dad came out as gay, so I don't want to out him as gay. He may not be gay, and that would be just rude either way, but we're outing them as a Patriot Front member. It's interesting, you have to clarify that. Anyway, she goes on, and that they don't want him to be a part of their group because his mom has loose lips and a big mouth, and he's never going to get away with anything. that's a strategy. It might work. Amsden said her son had vowed to remain with the group after his release from jail, so she gave him an ultimatum. I told him, well, then you can't live here. You can choose between Patriot Front and your family. And remember, you're fighting for family values, right? And he's like, well, I can't quit Patriot Front. I'm like, well, then you've just chosen, so pack up your stuff and get out of my house. Bad choice, kid. I doubt that Patriot Front can cook. I don't know whether Mom can, but I'm going to assume gender roles and just say, sure, he's made it this far. I don't know how old he is. Oh, yes, I do. 27. Police said the 27-year-old from Springville, Utah, was out of state, of course, among 31 masked men from various states who were spotted climbing into a U-Haul truck packed with riot gear, right? Climbing into the back of a U-Haul truck. Question your life choices right there at that point. It's, like I said, very low rent and dangerous way of going. And also, by the way, smacks terribly of human trafficking. You did cross the state border, so internally in the United States, I guess that doesn't carry any particular weight, although who knows what you'll be charged with. But you're not supposed to ride in the back of a U-Haul truck, and certainly not 31 of you. What an uncomfortable way to go. And if they were truly middle-class Americans, they would have had their own transportation. Why couldn't they all drive in good old-fashioned American gas-guzzling cars? I don't know. But anyway, so what I was going to say was he's 27 years old. I don't know if Mom can cook, but Mom provides meals one way or another. He's survived 27 years, so he's eating something, and I doubt he's fending for himself, or else the threat to kick him out of the house wouldn't mean much, is what I'm saying, aside from assuming gender roles. Anyway, so let's see. There's more. They climbed into this U-Haul with, of course, riot gear, shields, and a smoke grenade. I would have loved to have seen that go off by accident in the middle of that. Although probably could have suffocated. Well, maybe that's not it. All right, anyway, along with an operations plan for possibly violent confrontation at the parade, like IKEA instructions for how to, commit a riot. This is the funny phrasing of it. Okay, whatever, instructions. 31 of you, and here's some shields and a smoke grenade, and in case you don't know what you're doing, here's a list of what to do when you get there. They're not just white nationalists. They are not Western nationalists. They are not patriots. Said researcher John Lewis of George Washington University's program on extremism. They are neo-Nazis. Like they're the worst kind of extremist weirdos that dress up the same. An anonymous donor bailed the group members out of jail. Yikes. Boyce told his mother, and he justified his actions using language that has filtered up from the QAnon fringes to Fox News primetime programming and GOP lawmakers, as we like to say. Don't believe the media, Mom, Boyce said, according to his mother. We were just there because they're grooming kids. Sure. Boyce found the group online in 2018 when he was married with his then wife and their children. What? Really? Okay. So, 27. So he got married at some point, but now he's back in Mom's house? I didn't realize this. Found the group in 2018 when he was married with his then wife and their children, and Amsden said he quickly changed and his views became repugnant to her. He's so misguided and bought into all their rhetoric, it just makes me sick, Amsden said. This is not who I raised. This is not the example that was set for him. And I'm sure that that's the case, but you got him nonetheless. And, I'm a little bit confused about his own family status. It wouldn't be unusual for him to be married and have a couple of kids. Well, let's see, 2018, it's 22 now. It's 23 years old, pretty young, comparatively speaking, but certainly well within tolerances. But does this mean that he was married and he gave up his own family and now giving up his own birth family, his mom, for Patriot Front? There's a pretty serious illness here, and somebody ought to intervene, and I guess Mom's right in trying to do so. Anyway, I just thought that was, it was a funny headline, but now it's pretty revealing of a fairly serious story underneath, which is kind of sad. Oh, well, news can make you sad. It does happen. Let's see. Other stories worth sharing here. What else have I put aside here, and why? I guess is I'm going to have to open up all of these things. Oh yes, right. Another small detail story to add. The tweet from Nick Corasaniti. I thought it was Nick Corasanti, and I think I hear that name pronounced that way once in a while, but it's spelled Corasaniti, Saniti at the end. Well, okay, Nick Corasanti. I don't know why I hear it that way. Reporter for the New York Times, so it's difficult to know exactly how he says his name unless you catch him on TV, because nothing in the newspaper tells you. Anyway, in his inbox, we are informed, was a note from Republican candidate for governor in Pennsylvania, Doug Mastriano, who, of course, is a big lie adherent and declares his intent to use the office to send to Washington electors for Donald Trump, or I guess any Republican presidential candidate, regardless of the outcome of the popular vote in Pennsylvania. And to that end, he announced yesterday the appointment of former Trump lawyer Jenna Ellis as his senior legal advisor for his 2022 gubernatorial campaign. So all the parking tickets that they get will be fixed, I guess, or at least contested in traffic court. Now that they've got Jenna Ellis on board. Just thought I would tell you where she is, and I don't know whether you would regard that as landing on your feet. I mean, it's a job and it'll pay, and I guess that's a good thing. It'll keep her in SpaghettiOs or whatever she eats to stay alive. I don't really care to know. But if you can consider moving from White House or campaign counsel to the president to campaign counsel for a Republican crazy-ass nominee for governor of Pennsylvania, landing on your feet, it pays, like I said. But beyond that, not too much. Sorely tempted to read you the story of the cupcake mogul who led the wild double life using a dead baby's identity story. Did you read that? Maybe some feedback. If you didn't read it and you need to hear that read aloud, like Drag Queen Story Hour style, we can take care of that and bring that to you. Let's see. Yes, I wanted to go over to Wisconsin. I just wanted to visit Wisconsin, really. But now bumping up against the top of the hour break, but perhaps we can start in on this. I have two stories from Wisconsin describing what's going on there. One from the Wisconsin Examiner, one from the Capital Times, Cap Times for short. Let me just read these to you and share what's going on in Wisconsin best I can before the top of the hour break and maybe a little bit afterwards. The Cap Times, Jack Kelly and Allison Garfield reporting on June 10th that a judge was holding Gableman's office in contempt in an open records lawsuit. Very interesting, interesting fight going on there. A Dane County judge on Friday found Wisconsin Office of Special Counsel, led by former State Supreme Court Justice Michael Gableman, in contempt of court after determining that it had not complied with a previous court order. Dane County judge found on Friday that the whole office, not just Gableman himself, the Wisconsin Office of Special Counsel, led by Gableman, is now in contempt. Dane County Circuit Court Judge Frank Remington declined on Friday to issue sanctions against the office, saying he will outline them in a written order at a later date. Remington denied motions to hold the state assembly and its speaker, Robin Voss, in contempt. The decision from Remington came after Gableman, a conservative attorney leading a GOP or GOP-backed review of Wisconsin's 2020 presidential election, refused to answer questions at a Friday court hearing about his office's handling of documents related to his election review. Somebody's asking for the documents. The court has said they have a right to the documents. Gableman says, well, if I had to give every scrap of paper, blah, blah, blah. And, he's putting up a fight, and the judge is saying, look, this is a specific order. Turn over what we're asking for specifically, or you'll be in contempt. Well, I shouldn't have to. Well, whatever you might think about this is my courtroom. You've been a judge. You understand what's going on. Either produce the documents, or don't tell me about how difficult it is, or how I have to save every scrap of paper. Do you have them? If you have them, you won't be in contempt. If you don't have them today to produce, you will be in contempt. Stop arguing. But he just couldn't, I guess. Gableman's testimony, is he representing himself in this? Which began after a series of failed procedural efforts from his attorney, to adjourn the hearing, lasted about 4 minutes. He did not answer questions from an attorney representing liberal watchdog group American Oversight, the one suing for the papers, and offered fiery criticism of Judge Remington. While on the stand, Gableman accused Remington of acting as an advocate for American Oversight instead of as an objective party. That's not going to help you. It is my firm belief that this judge has abandoned his role as a neutral magistrate, Gableman said on the stand. When the judge starts telling my office that if I were you, I'd get a lawyer because you could go to jail, all of a sudden I somehow think that my personal rights are at stake too. Well, that's because they are. The judge in your case that you're involved with and being threatened with contempt of court has just told you and everybody in your office, get a lawyer because you could go to jail. I somehow suddenly think my personal rights are at stake too. They are. You were just threatened with jail. You haven't said anything here. With both Remington and Krista Westerberg, an attorney for American Oversight, unable to get a word in because of Gableman's interjections, Remington warned the former state Supreme Court justice of his role as a witness. You have had a long and storied career serving the public. I do not need to tell you that I expect you to control yourself, control your behavior, and in the behavior I expect of a witness on the stand, Remington said. No question has been asked of you. You're not given the opportunity to make a speech. Still, Gableman argued further with the judge, saying he refused to be, quote, railroaded. I thought the only issue at play in this whole thing was 97 documents that were late getting over to Ms. Westerberg, and the whole question is, should we be held in contempt? Gableman contended to the court. Now I find out it's your intent to let her do a fishing expedition. No more. I'm silent. 4 minutes of screaming silence. Terrific. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue with this story just because it's so, wacky crazy going on in Wisconsin. And I don't know, I'm waiting now. I guess I should check to see whether there's any developments in terms of the judge bringing the hammer down in terms of what he's really going to do, what sanctions are going to be put in place. So Gableman screams about how he's going to be silent for 4 minutes. He refused to answer any further questions. He gets silent at the end, I guess, from Westerberg, concluding his testimony. Gableman's testimony stemmed from a lawsuit about his handling of records related to his review of Wisconsin's 2020 presidential election. The lawsuit was filed by American Oversight, which is engaged in 3 such lawsuits in Dane County. The former state Supreme Court justice was required to testify after Remington on Wednesday ruled against an attempt from Gableman's attorney to quash a subpoena compelling his appearance. There's no factual basis for quashing the subpoena based on inconvenience to Mr. Gableman, Remington said on Wednesday. Gableman's attorney indicated earlier this week that Gableman was supposed to be traveling Friday. To where? Who cares? I don't know. Remington held the hearing Friday to determine if Gableman and his staff intentionally deleted records in response to a request from American Oversight. He said Wednesday that they could be held in contempt if they had intentionally deleted responsive records, right? American Oversight sues, says we have the right to these records. This is a publicly funded investigation. Gableman allegedly, someone in the office there decides, for whatever reason, best for us if American Oversight and these libs don't get a look at this information. And therefore, they decide to delete it rather than turn it over. If true, of course, it would be a violation of a court order, assuming that there was, in fact, a court order to turn these papers over to American Oversight, and it certainly sounds like there was. You can't just delete evidence rather than turn it over. That will trigger exactly what's going on here. If you're ordered to turn it over and you think that that information is damaging to you and you delete it rather than turn it over, the court is entitled to hold you in contempt for doing so and entitled to instruct the jury in any case later on that, yes, you can infer knowledge of guilt from the defendant in this, from the fact that they have destroyed the evidence rather than turn it over. Yes, we're already punishing them with contempt, but yes, you can punish them even further by assuming that this is essentially their admission that the information that they were sending over was indicative of their guilt. That's the two sides of what, there are two punishments involved. It's a dumb thing to do. It'll get you in trouble with the court, but it'll also get you in trouble not just directly with the court, but in your case as well. You've offended both the plaintiff and the court here, and both are entitled to punish you for doing so. Then, let's see, back to the story. So, it is said, deleted these responsive records rather than turn them over. Then in March, after reviewing hundreds of pages of documents, Remington ordered Gableman to turn over to the court. The judge determined that the former state Supreme Court justice had not been conducting a serious review. Your order to turn over is very often the request. Anything having to do with might be as broad as, give us any emails and text messages relevant to your investigation and review of the 2020 election. And if you neglect to turn them over or decline to turn them over or delete them or something like that, then you'll be in trouble. If you legitimately think, well, there's another reason why we shouldn't turn this over, either it's covered by attorney-client privilege or something else that's of importance and that you can prove to a court, the court can say, all right, you think you have an exception to the rule, that's fine. I won't say yes or no to it just yet, but we'll have a review. Show me the documents and tell me why you think that it's in the public interest that American Oversight not get access to this document. Just tell me the reason. I might agree with you, I might disagree with you, but just tell me the reason. And if you have a point, I'll say so, and you won't have to turn this paper over. If you don't have a point and you're totally wrong, then you'll have to turn the paper over. And at this point, Gableman essentially is saying, you have no right to decide whether or not we have to turn these things over. But yeah, they have every right. This is exactly who has that power and who has that right. And he's just being ridiculous. And for a person who supposedly served on the state's Supreme Court at some point, I mean, boy, talk about abandoning all legal principles for pure gimmitarianism. How can you be a state Supreme Court justice and not see and not understand that it's the role of the court to decide whether or not you have to turn these papers over? But he just says it isn't and screams and blusters, you can't do this to me, when in fact the court very well can. Then, in late April, Remington ordered Gableman and his staff not to delete any records that might be responsive to American Oversight's request. He made the ruling after James Bopp, an attorney for Gableman, indicated that the conservative lawyer and his staff often deleted records that they deemed irrelevant or useless to the investigation. That happens sometimes, but then you have to answer for it. I mean, you just do. Like, how many times during, I don't know, the Benghazi investigation did Republicans say, well, Hillary Clinton didn't turn over, Trump was screaming about it all the way through the 2016 elections. Where's the 33,000 missing emails? And remember what was going on here. Just to put the shoe on the other foot for a second, it was the Clinton campaign, I guess, in some question, but also the Clintons, wind down Secretary of State staff post her, following her service as Secretary of State, who, in sifting through emails to be responsive to requests for relevant emails, relevant to the Benghazi issue or anything else, whoever they're being sued for. Hillary Clinton gets sued left and right. But if you search through and, they want all emails relevant to Benghazi, you look for everything that mentions Benghazi or anything surrounding Benghazi. But then when it comes to, what about all the rest of your emails? How do we know that they're not about Benghazi? Well, you're just going to have to trust us that they're not. And we're not turning over, for instance, recipes for polenta, right? Or requests to go, who wants to go and get pizza? And now you know where we're going with all this. This is how crazy things can get, right? The plaintiffs say, how do we know that the polenta recipe or the pizza recipe isn't code for some other crazy thing that you're doing, whether it's Benghazi related or, as dumb as it sounds now in hindsight, what about if pizza was code word for child molestation in the basement that doesn't exist at the pizza place that doesn't do any of the things that we somehow imagine you're doing, right? At some point, like a normal person, judge has to draw the line and just say, no, it's just not it's not likely enough for this court to be convinced that you can hold Hillary Clinton in contempt of court for not turning over emails about pizza because you think it's secretly a code word for child molestation. I'm sorry, that's not a relevant responsive email, and you have no claim here. That's what was at the heart of all of that, and the heart of what became Pizzagate. Here, we're doing it all over again. It's a question, except this time they're actually deleting things that are apparently relevant to the lawsuit at hand, but they're just simply claiming that they're not. And it's not up to you very often. You're ordered not to destroy or delete the emails, and you do it, you're in contempt of court. The end. Even if it turns out that if they're able to recover those emails fully and review them and find out that they're not responsive at all, the remedy there was for you to come into court and say, Your Honor, these are just not responsive. Here they are. Take a look. You'll see. I think you'll agree. And they might not agree, but if they do, then that's the remedy. If you delete them and they turn out to have not been responsive, you're still in trouble for violating the order not to delete them. That's a problem. And that's what I guess they did. And he's astonished that it's a problem. Remington's written contempt ruling, which will be issued at a later date, we should see if that's come out yet, will determine the sanctions for Gableman's office. So anyway, that's the craziness that's going on. I don't know whether it's necessary, whether it adds anything to look at the Wisconsin Examiner view of this. Well, it looks like it's actually broader reaching in the commentary. So let's give it a look. Gableman's contempt and the destruction of democracy. That's bigger than just the destruction of a couple of emails, right? Ruth Conniff offering this commentary here. It's not really a coincidence, she begins, that the morning after the first explosive public hearing by the House committee investigating the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol last week, former Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice Michael Gableman, the man appointed by Republican Assembly Speaker Robin Vos to lead the partisan probe of the 2020 election in Wisconsin, was held in contempt of court. Gableman's contempt for the rule of law and the institutions of our democracy, which he demonstrated in his bombastic, sarcastic performance in the Dane County Circuit Court on Friday, is the same style of demagoguery practiced by Donald Trump. So yeah, this is a good follow-up. Like Trump, Gableman is a narcissist and a bully whose taboo-breaking nastiness, posturing as an injured hero of a popular movement who is somehow standing up for the little guy by displaying sneering disrespect for public officials in the courts, is part of a more general, dangerous trend. Trump, according to House investigators, encouraged a murderous mob to attack the U.S. Capitol to try to prevent the certification of the 2020 presidential election. Gableman has furthered Trump's efforts with his baseless investigation, pushing the discredited idea that there was a massive voter fraud in Wisconsin, while leading his publicly funded probe that has cost Wisconsin taxpayers almost $1 million. He has refused to turn over records, the issue for which Judge Frank Remington held him in contempt. And remember that the whole idea of this investigation is a search for records and information. We just want to dig and get to the bottom of what really happened. So you dug something up? Yeah. Can we see it? No. but you're publicly funded. You owe it to us to show this. Well, I'm not gonna. Well, I order you to show it. Well, I'm going to delete it instead. Well, I order you not to delete it. Well, oops, too late. I deleted it. Well, then you're in trouble. No, I'm not. I mean, this is the stance that he's taking. And this is why, I guess, Ruth Conniff takes this stance in her commentary. It is a broader problem. And it is very much directly related to Donald Trump and what he's doing. I mean, he's holding this investigation on Donald Trump's behalf. So it's not at all ridiculous to draw parallels between them and to connect the two. You don't even need to draw parallels. It's the same thing. Even aside, did I read all of this here? Part of a more general dangerous trend. Trump, Gableman has furthered Trump's efforts with his baseless investigation. Even aside from the mounting evidence that Wisconsin Republicans played a major role in the conspiracy to overturn the results of the 2020 election, the coarsening of civic dialogue that Gableman represents is in itself a threat. That threat was already evident long before Trump was elected, when Gableman, the most overturned judge in the state, was elected to the Wisconsin Supreme Court after a scandalous, racist campaign and brought his disdainful, know-nothing style to an institution led by the late Chief Justice Shirley Abrahamson. I don't know whether she pronounces all the syllables in that. One of the most respected jurists in the nation. Gableman's rude treatment of Abrahamson was stomach-turning, as was his successful drive to erect a veil of secrecy around court business. Not typically the way things go in courtrooms, which conveniently cloaked discussions of his conflicts and not recusing himself from cases involving his donors. Gableman's only defense of the policy change was to say the open meetings were an experiment whose time was past. Things have gone downhill ever since. The footage of mayhem at the Capitol aired Thursday night during prime time by the House committee investigating the January 6th attack is a natural outgrowth of the dangerous demagoguery practiced by Trump and Gableman. Contempt is the right word for it. Contempt for the truth. Contempt for democracy, contempt for due process, and finally, contempt for civility and common decency, and even the physical safety of citizens, legislators, and public servants, including the Capitol Police, who were attacked and killed. House investigators are seeking to show that Trump was at the center of a far-reaching conspiracy to overturn election results. Wisconsin's fake electors and the fake Gableman investigation are an important part of that conspiracy. It's a short road from the assault on civil liberty launched by Gableman and Trump to mayhem. Their rhetoric encourages the destruction of peaceful civic life. Consider Gableman's appearance on Friday, when, after 45 minutes of argument by his lawyers that he should not have to testify at all, he finally took the stand. He then proceeded to deliver a bombastic speech, refused to answer questions, and denounced the judge, who, he declared without evidence, has abandoned his role as a neutral magistrate and is acting as an advocate. Dane County Circuit Judge Frank Remington directed Gableman to stop his filibuster. You've had a long and storied career serving the public, and he has to stop him. Let me finish, please, he said as Gableman interrupted him. Sure, if you'll let me finish, Gableman shot back. No, you don't get to even start. I'm talking here, not you. You'll let me finish. You want to be fair to me. No, I don't. You're a witness. Shut your mouth. That's not how it works, Remington reminded him. I do not need to tell you how I expect you to control yourself in the behavior that I expect from a witness on this stand. After a brief further exchange, Gableman said, You have a right to conduct and control your courtroom, Judge, but you don't have a right to act as an advocate for one party over the other. I want a personal counsel if you're putting jail on the table. Go ahead. I want a personal attorney to represent me personally. I will not answer any more questions. I see you have a jail officer here. You want to put me in jail, Judge Remington? I'm not going to be railroaded. I don't even know what that means. All of this talk of putting Gableman in jail was precipitated by Remington's instruction in an earlier hearing about the legal consequences of willfully withholding evidence in contempt of court, which includes, he explained on Friday, reading from the Wisconsin Judicial Bench book, imprisonment for 6 months, or as long as the contempt continues, whichever is shorter, in addition to payment to compensate the loss or injury suffered by a party, not to exceed $2,000 per day for each day a contempt continues. Despite Gableman's histrionics, at no time did I suggest that that was a sanction that I intended to impose, Remington added. The irony, of course, is that Gableman himself filed a petition in the Waukesha County Court asking that city staff, election workers, and mayors, the mayors of Green Bay, Madison, and Racine, all be thrown in jail if they don't comply with his subpoenas, including demands that they give testimony in secret closed-door sessions the mayors said were improper. The Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel reports that the city administrator of Kenosha, upon answering Gableman's subpoena, appeared only to find that he was to be deposed by a lawyer who was not licensed to practice in Wisconsin, upon which he left. This kind of bumbling is par for the course in Gableman's office of special counsel. As the Examiner's Henry Redmond reports, Gableman has repeatedly disregarded open records requests, and his lawyer has said that he regularly deletes records that he deems, quote, irrelevant to his review, which so far has turned up nothing more than baseless accusations of election fraud. In a separate lawsuit seeking records he has so far refused to release, Dane County Judge Valerie Bailey Rhine, or R-I-H-N, Rhine, had said he had run amok and gone rogue as he continued to disregard the state's open records laws. What is Gableman hiding? Keystone Cop-style incompetence, wasting money, and coming up with nothing are the hallmarks of his ridiculous probe, which he and Voss justify as an effort to increase, quote, transparency, of all things, and public confidence in Wisconsin's elections. We already know Gableman used the taxpayers' funds to attend a conspiracy theory conference hosted by MyPillow CEO Mike Lindell and to visit Arizona to inspect its discredited audit. After throwing his tantrum on the stand Friday, Gableman invoked his Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate himself and swept out of the courtroom. No one arrested him. His gambit worked. He was able to continue withholding information. Later, Remington issued an order holding him in contempt. American Oversight, the group that has been suing Gableman for information, issued a statement. Mr. Gableman's outrageous and disrespectful conduct in court today removed any last shred of credibility from this partisan charade. Or charade, if you are listening in the UK, I suppose. Far from increasing transparency and instilling greater confidence in the 2020 elections, by repeatedly flouting Wisconsin transparency laws, Mr. Gableman and Speaker Voss have shamed their offices and undermined their own investigation. Undermining public trust in democratic institutions and sowing chaos and distrust is actually what the investigation is all about. And that's a growing problem for all of us, concludes Ruth Conniff, again in the Wisconsin Examiner. So a very good way of tying the local Wisconsin happenings to the national Trump happenings, and well worth doing. So I appreciate both the input from the Cap Times and the Wisconsin Examiner on that one. And now we're up to date on what's up in Wisconsin. Coming up to our second bottom of the hour break, which means it's getting close to Joan McCarter times. We used to, of course, get a good update on what was going on in Idaho from Joan. Now we know what's going on in Idaho. They're arresting white supremacists in Coeur d'Alene, and that's good news, but Joan's not in Idaho, so that's fine. Good time to get out of Idaho. Now we can get an update on what's going on around her where she is currently. Perhaps, if she's been able to pay attention to that in between all of the extra tasks and the flurry of work and excitement and whatever else, chores going on around the move. All right, let's see. We got a couple more minutes here before our break, and I'm trying to decide which of the following stories might add most to the picture. How about this one? It's a promising title, and it's in the Atlantic, and that's sometimes exciting. Kate Shaw writing a piece called The Other Cause of January 6th. I want to figure out whether it's another one that we hadn't thought of or one that we say, oh, yeah, we know that one. Let's figure out, oh, this is interesting. Without the Electoral College, this sounds appropriately high level, without the Electoral College, America would never have come so close to an overthrow of its government. Okay, let's figure out what, we can all guess what the role is, but this is an interesting point here, something to think about in the middle of all the rest of this confusion. John Eastman, Rudy Giuliani, Donald Trump himself, begins Kate Shaw, who is, by the way, a law professor at Cardozo, the Benjamin N. Cardozo School of Law. These people all bear some responsibility for the events of January 6th, 2021. Who was it? Oh, Kevin McCarthy the other day said, I think all Americans bear some responsibility, right? Well, these are the chiefs, Eastman, Giuliani, and Trump. But there is another contributing factor, Kate says, Professor Shaw says, an institution, not a person, whose role is regularly overlooked, not here, and it deserves a focus in the ongoing January 6th committee hearings. Oh, I don't think they're planning for this. The Electoral College. The Electoral College isn't responsible for President Trump's efforts to remain in office despite his clear loss, but it was integral to Trump's strategy and has everything to do with how close he came to success. Many Americans understand that the country's anachronistic system of presidential selection, part constitutional, part statutory, can sometimes produce a winner who does not receive the most votes nationwide. In 2016, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by approximately 3 million, but lost in the Electoral College 304 to 227. 16 years earlier, Al Gore won 500,000 more votes than George W. Bush nationwide, but Bush prevailed in the Electoral College 271 to 266 after the Supreme Court functionally awarded him Florida's electoral votes. And even without Trump's machinations, the 2020 election came dangerously close to producing yet again a president who did not win the national popular vote. Joe Biden won approximately 7 million more votes than Trump and prevailed in the Electoral College 306 to 232, but just 44,000 additional Trump votes in Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin could have resulted in a 269 to 269 tie in the Electoral College. And if that had happened, the House, voting by state delegation, would almost certainly have anointed Trump president despite his second popular vote loss. But there's a problem with the Electoral College that's distinct from the fact that it sometimes selects a winner who does not receive the most votes nationwide, and from the way it creates a political process that overvalues the concerns of voters in an arbitrary subset of states, increasing polarization, dysfunction, and division. I elaborate on these dynamics in a recent essay in the Michigan Law Review, as does Jesse Wegman in the book that's the subject of my essay, Let the People Pick the President. The problem is this. The Electoral College today is dangerously susceptible to manipulation. Indeed, as 2020 showed, the complex process through which a candidate becomes president contains a number of post-election opportunities to contest or undermine the results of an election, and to do so for reasons purportedly having to do with law and legal process. Consider the Trump campaign's many lawsuits designed to delay state certification beyond the safe harbor deadline created by the Electoral Count Act, after which a state's slate of electors is no longer deemed conclusive in the event of a dispute. Or Trump's supporters' efforts to disrupt the statutorily required meetings at which the state's electors actually cast their votes, and the attempts of ersatz, that is fake, Trump electors to lay the groundwork for later challenges to official state slates. Trump also personally pressured state election officials to change election results by, quote, finding enough additional votes that he would be entitled to all of the state's electoral votes. Trump loyalists in the Department of Justice and Trump supporters such as Ginny Thomas sought to push legislatures to take the radical step of throwing out the state returns on the basis of spurious fraud claims and appointing Trump electors themselves. Trump and at least one of his attorneys sought to pressure Vice President Mike Pence to refuse to count electoral votes from a number of states in which Biden received more votes, pointing to the vice president's central role in counting, quote-unquote counting, electoral votes in the last stage of the Electoral College process created by the 12th Amendment. When that failed, what became the January 6th attack on the Capitol was an effort to disrupt that final event in the Electoral College timeline. Put plainly, for a candidate determined to win at all costs, the Electoral College was central to a post-election strategy designed to convert loss into victory. Very interesting. Now, there's a bit more to this, and maybe we can even get to it and even discuss it with Joan. But Joan's up next after the break. We'll see you in a minute. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Joan McCarter is here, just as she said she would be. And by the way, I finally answered the question that I had lingering in the back of my mind. It's, where did you move to, Joan? So now you're relocated out of Boise and in Portland. We have both Portlands covered now.
Yes.
So that's good. From Portland,
isn't that exciting?
Maine to Portland, Oregon. Everything. Yeah, right. All the well, there might be other Portlands out there. Probably are. We'll have to check it out, and then we'll identify listeners and Daily Coast readers who live in every Portland eventually.
These are the two most important ones, though.
Yes, well, don't tell them that.
You know.
Well, the stage will be open for debate if you want to make the case for Portland, probably Texas. They steal all the names. All right. Well, at any rate, glad to hear that things are settling down a bit there, and everything should be calm in the background fairly soon too, right? So
I hope so. I hope so. I still don't know about this time change, but we're dealing with that. That's been a huge part of the problem. I'm trying to keip to my set schedule, and that means starting work at 6, which is kind of
tough. Yeah, it's interesting for a West Coast operation like Daily Coast. I mean, look, the reality is you're covering a lot of things that happen on the East Coast. And in Congress, if we should move the Congress to West Coast, then that would make it easier. But no, it's not to be.
Nope.
All right.
Out of curiosity, I Googled. Yes, there is a Portland, Texas.
I figured. They steal every name. Paris.
And a Portland,
probably
Arkansas.
Another one. What? Another what? Portland where?
Arkansas.
Okay.
And Kansas.
Yeah.
And Ohio. And Tennessee.
That's astonishing, considering there's no ports.
Yeah.
I mean, there's land, but okay. I wonder whether they're naming it after Portland's, one or the other, or what? I mean, what would you? Why would you say? Yeah, Portland, Tennessee. There are ports in Texas, I guess, but not in Tennessee. But.
We welcome all of the Portlandites.
Welcome, Portlanders.
Near and far.
Or whatever you would call yourselves, whatever your Portland pronouns are, you can tell us. And it'd be interesting to see if we could find or unite the Portlands. You can have a march in one of the Portlands, but it would be for good things instead of bad.
Yes.
Okay. You must have did you have a special eye on what happened in Coeur d'Alene the other day? Am I pronouncing it correctly, by the way?
Coeur d'Alene.
Okay, good.
It's just like apple core.
Okay.
And because it's Idaho.
Yeah, Coeur, not Coeur. Coeur. Although Coeur maybe because if your accent is Canadian tinged maybe, but you think you're saying Coeur, but you're really saying Coeur.
Yes.
Okay.
And one part of it is I'm glad to see that it wasn't mostly not Idahoans doing it, but that's on nice. The other hand makes me sad that the rest of the country does indeed see Idaho as the place to do this kind of thing.
Yeah, that is true.
Really impressed with local law enforcement's response.
Yeah.
And particularly the sheriff, I think it's the sheriff it's the chief of police, who's been making very good statements and reminding the world that, we've seen this rodeo before in that area with the Aryan nations, and we're not going to go back and do that again. His statements were really good, really on point. Impressive. I also have to wonder a little bit how much they talked some about the chatter that they saw on these sites, on far-right sites about this event, and how prepared they were, because that was really a swift and effective response, and I'm wondering if they didn't have a little bit more of a heads up than just that anonymous tip from a concerned citizen.
Okay, is that
who
where
saw them loading into the van? But I don't know. That's speculation on my part.
Yeah, I'm wondering about that because I think one of the videos that was initially circulated had one of the cops on the scene say that they had an informant, which might, in the cop's mind, be what the person who called and said, and reported it and gave the tip. That's not really an informant in the same way we understand it as an infiltrator or something like that.
Yeah.
But then you also wonder, well, would the officer who's there to provide a barrier from the public while they're arresting these people know whether or not there was an informant or anything like that? I mean, I guess they were on the scene because they were part of the stop. So they
knew that it was going to be a target.
Yeah.
If they didn't know this precise plot, they knew it was going to be a target. And in fact, Dave Newert has a good write-up on this that posted yesterday. He was there. He's a roving Northwest reporter, so he got there.
Usually watching orcas. But.
There were a lot of, well, not a lot. There was definitely an armed and threatening presence throughout the day in the crowd.
Yes, besides these guys.
And sort of patrolling and some, interfering, some harassing people, some just lurking on the edges of the crowd with their weapons looking menacing.
Yeah.
So the cops were definitely prepared for something to be happening there. Whether they knew that this plot was hatching, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it must have been an extraordinary alert and just a disappointment to them in general. Like, okay, there's nothing we can do about people who... We've made it impossible in this state and many others to do anything about people who are roaming in the crowd with weapons.
They've encouraged it in Idaho, in fact.
So
it's open carry everywhere.
Yeah. So not much they can do there. But it must have just been, the cops, I can imagine, just sighing when they get this information like, we can deal the best we can as long as nobody goes crazy with people roaming around with weapons nearby an event like the Pride demonstration and say, all right, there'll be tensions, but if we have enough cops and enough people on bikes, whatever, somehow bikes became a popular way of preventing crime. I'm not really sure.
You can get around fast on a bike.
Yeah, and you make tight little, pursuits. If you're chasing somebody down an alley and a car doesn't fit. You've seen the movies. The car's not wide enough, or too wide for the alleys. Anyway, but to just be like, it's not enough, that we just patrol and keep people apart. Somebody's got to load up a van, a U-Haul of all things. What if they had an accident on the way there? That really would have been something. Just a pile of broken bones falling out the box.
I don't think they went more than half a mile.
Probably not.
They were pretty close by.
But it just seems like a really weird way. But I guess it makes the story of the one member who was arrested getting kicked out of his mom's house make a lot more sense when you realize
that a U-Haul van would be there.
Yeah, right. You guys don't have cars or bus passes or anything. But I guess they want to be they don't want anybody to see them all dressed the same until they arrive. Because, I don't know what, they would point and laugh, or it would spoil the element of surprise, or whatever.
Well, yeah, I think they wanted to come in en masse. I think they wanted to have the big group of them swarming together, and that would have been hard to achieve if they all arrived individually. So.
I guess so, but really, I don't know, get a bus. But
yeah.
Anyway,
Mom's minivan.
Yeah, something, right. Somebody's got some, anyway, so U-Haul, that's pretty weird. And it must have been awfully uncomfortable, and but they've done it before, and we see this a lot actually a lot of these demonstrations and counter demonstrations. There's U-Hauls involved. I recall it coming up a couple of times. Not that U-Haul, sponsors it or anything. That's what you can rent truck wise. But I recall that in Charlottesville this was happening too. That sometimes they were just using the trucks for their shields and weapons, and I've been wondering when police outfits were going to get serious about saying, as they do at many political rallies and things, the security staff there will tell you can't bring in signs on a stake or a stick. They don't want them used as weapons. But these guys keep arriving with shields and clubs and wearing all kinds of makeshift armor and helmets. And I've been wondering when the police are going to say, people who show up wearing this stuff and carrying this stuff will be arrested for that.
Yeah.
And but I guess it's difficult if you're like, well, it's legal to carry an AR-15, but not a club. I suppose that creates some space. But maybe the gun nuts ought to think about that, except that they're probably happy about having these neo-Nazis march around. So, I don't know, but that seems to be part of the problem. But I'm so glad, like you said, appropriate police response and saying the right things on top of it all. There's two parts to this, arresting them and actually saying the right thing about it, and they seem to have gotten it right in both counts.
They seem to have this time, and thank them for it.
Yeah.
Showing more courage and more spine than any other Idaho politician.
Yeah, and that's very frequently the case that the police aren't super happy about the gun laws that the politicians put in place for them to deal with.
Yes.
And probably the same there in Idaho. All right. Well, you're not in Idaho anymore, but we do always have a special place for Idaho news.
It's
national here.
It's better to not be in Idaho. There's less personal jeopardy in writing about this stuff and talking about this stuff.
Good.
Here. I mean, I was doxxed to the 3%ers.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, back in Idaho.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine.
For everybody's safety, really felt like I needed to kind of step back from talking about some of this stuff, which pissed me off, frankly.
Right. They got what they wanted out of it, and that's annoying. But, okay, well, you're relocated to better place and happier for it, so that's good news.
I'll be at a damp and cold place.
Well, yeah. I guess there's not that much to be done about that.
We made a record rainfall this week in Portland. So following an April that hit a record and a May that hit a record.
Well, someone should check out whether something's going on with weather patterns in the planet.
Yeah, I wonder what's happening there with that.
I don't know. We'll look into that. Other things, by the way, though, I'm just checking through what you've been writing on lately, and I love the headline of the first piece that's up from this morning. It's time to get serious about impeaching Clarence Thomas.
It is indeed.
Can we do that now? We can get serious about it, certainly.
Let's get serious about it.
Wow.
Yeah, I know that the Senate is not going to convict.
Yes.
But if there is going to be any kind of constraint at all on the Supreme Court, Congress has to say, oh, hey, look, remember this? We're a co-equal branch. Mm-hmm. You don't get to get away with this kind of stuff, acting as though you serve as Emperor of the United States. Because you're not, because we're co-equal. And remember? Yeah. And by the way, your wife is a seditionist.
Yes. Could we have you not?
And, we don't have any assurances that you are not in it with her.
Yeah. I mean, the basis for such an impeachment, is solid. I mean, certainly the things that we suspect are happening there are worrisome. But yeah, the constitutional language is that while you're serving for life, it is actually during periods of good behavior. As long as you're exhibiting good behavior, that's the only guideline. So it could mean anything, but sedition is bad behavior.
Sedition is very bad behavior.
We have to have something about that.
Upending decades upon decades of jurisprudence is a little radical.
Yes.
One of the things that prompted this was one of the things that the crazy Trump legal team, which we know was a crazy legal team,
right?
Even well before the January 6 hearings, pointed it out. One of the things that they came to the Supreme Court with was the independent legislature theory. That the Constitution, it's a crazy reading of the Constitution brought to us back in, when was it? Rehnquist cooked up this idea a couple decades ago.
What happened to him?
And Republicans have sort of been building up to it since, and it was one of the arguments that the Trump team tried to bring in Pennsylvania and Arizona and a number of the states where they were trying to overturn election results, was that the Constitution gives state legislatures final authority on federal elections, which is kind of a kooky interpretation.
Yeah.
Since it's states, which, yes, were given the power to conduct elections, but to say that the states are supreme, that the state courts don't have any say, that federal courts don't have any say, that Congress doesn't have any say, that state legislators are the final arbiters on federal elections.
Yes.
And we know that 4 of the justices kind of like this idea, including Clarence Thomas, and essentially invited, over a gerrymandering argument in North Carolina and Pennsylvania, essentially invited both of those states to bring to them a case to decide it once and for all. It was presented to them on the shadow docket as an emergency order, and 3 of them said, yeah, let's do it. A 4th said, let's not hurry up and do this. Let's decide it normally. That was Kavanaugh.
Okay.
So there are the 4 who will likely want to take this case. We don't know yet. It hasn't been in the orders that the Supreme Court has released so far for what they're taking up in the fall. Chances are it will be. And chances are there are 5 votes to do it.
Pretty worrisome. It's a very odd theory and relatively recent vintage. It's not brand new because, as you mentioned, I guess Rehnquist cooked it up, but I don't even remember in what context Rehnquist was discussing it.
I don't either, and I have to go back and look at that. The Brennan Center wrote up a good history of it that I linked to. I left out the Rehnquist part, which is why I don't remember it.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and check that out myself. But yeah, I'm most familiar with it being used recently in I guess the December round of lawsuits from the Trump team.
Right.
And it being rejected by the federal courts in Wisconsin, I recall.
And it goes directly back to what Ginny Thompson was doing. Thomas, sorry. Yes. Okay. I don't know where Thompson came from. What Ginny Thomas was trying to do in lobbying, at least we know, the 27 legislators in Arizona, and probably, we haven't seen the emails from the other states, but chances are it wasn't just Arizona, saying... Yeah. You have the power. You get to overturn the results of this popular vote. claim fraud, claim whatever you want to. It doesn't matter because you're the ultimate authority, so you get to do what you want. Appoint your alternate electors.
Yeah. And I think it's an overstatement of their position, of course, but whatever, they just make it up as they go along. But so far, the federal courts that have treated it at all have pretty much agreed that the proper reading of the language here is that the state legislatures get to decide ahead of time what kind of selection process there will be for electors and then execute it. What this new theory is that the state legislatures can take as many bites at the apple as they want, and that if they decide on an election and they hold an election and they don't like the election results, they can say, "Oh, we meant something else. We're going to draw lots or flip a coin or select them ourselves, not have an election. Sorry to trouble you and to spend all that money and to have all of you have to take time off on a Tuesday to go and vote or fill out your mail-in ballots or whatever, but we didn't mean it.
You voted wrong, so it doesn't count."
Yeah. Right. And I mean, most federal courts have said, no, that it says here you choose the manner in which you'll select your electors, and then you do it. Not that you just choose your electors and then backfill it with explanation later. So I don't know where that came from. And I'll bet that Rehnquist didn't even say that when he was talking about it. He was probably talking about the plenary powers of the state legislatures to choose the method of selecting their electors, and that ultimately they could select them themselves, so that there was wide leeway. But I would guess that Rehnquist wasn't saying, and if you choose them and then you change your mind later, you can choose a different bunch also. I don't think that.
Yeah, I don't think Rehnquist was saying, here's a really good trick for overturning the popular vote.
Probably not. I think he thought no doubt he was partisan in his leanings in saying, I want state legislatures to be able to settle genuine disputes about what's going on. But I doubt that even Rehnquist, although who knows what he would be doing if he was still alive.
Right.
Probably trying to escape. But anyway, if he were still alive and serving on the court, that is to say, he you never know what he's going to come up with, but he would probably require that there be some sort of genuine dispute, not that you'd create a dispute by acting as the legislature. What if we don't have a dispute, but we now declare a dispute to be afoot and therefore choose new electors? You'd hope that would offend Rehnquist, but I guess we'll never know.
We'll never know. He's
Thomas, right? So
but
there's no
back to Clarence Thomas,
who's not dead, as it turns out. But,
he's not going to recuse himself from this, should it come to the court, despite the fact that his wife is neck deep in it all.
Yeah,
and
he didn't recuse himself last time.
Let's do some investigating. Let's remind the court that they are answerable to someone.
It would be wise. I think you're right in that, and you're certainly correct that the Senate would be in no mood to convict and remove him, not with this many Republicans on board, and they will view it as a partisan thing.
But it would also be a message to them that, Democrats are not going to be entirely milquetoast about this. Yes, I know Democrats are going to be entirely milquetoast about this, but
the message is
we'll continue to hold out hope that somebody will see light.
Yeah. But, it would be wise to push it. Why not? We have had, I think, a pretty good track record of success in terms of a couple years down the road. It takes a while. But finding that more and more Democratic senators, as milquetoast as they can be, will at least start saying, this is really something we should expect of people.
And it can lead to making expanding the Supreme Court not look like quite such a radical idea.
Yeah.
Which it's not. It is not. There is nothing that says there has to be 9 justices anywhere.
That's definitely true. And certainly, it does make it seem less radical. If it worries you to say impeach and remove Supreme Court justices for things like this, even though really this is bad behavior, but it worries you to undo this stuff. Well, there's another approach. Just make sure that this isn't the dominant view on the court, and that the right number of justices are there to handle the increased caseload from an increased number of federal circuits as well. And don't worry about it so much. The real radical act is refusing to recuse when you're the only one out of the 9, by the way, who is interested in, say, quashing committee subpoenas because they might come close to your wife.
Yes.
That's probably something, I mean, that's pretty clearly something you should have recused for. And 8 justices, I think, agreed that you probably should have kept your mouth shut and just let it be an 8-0 thing. This is an embarrassment as an 8-1. It's an embarrassment for you.
There are 4 others who are not particularly concerned about being embarrassed.
Yeah. Well,
and one who's having a hard time sitting on the fence of our Chief Justice. Let's see. I don't want to be embarrassed, but at the same time,
I don't know. All my friends are okay with being embarrassed. Maybe I shouldn't. All right.
Yeah. So.
Well, I hope, but we definitely have room for asking that question. Yeah, it's true that it won't come out right and he won't be removed, but create that pressure and create that interest in paying attention on a national level to what is happening and what these justices are up to. And other things may fall out of it.
They're going to make really easy for us in the coming weeks.
Yeah, right, true. Everyone will be up in arms just based on their regular routine business of doing damage to our understanding of what the law is and has been.
Yes.
And what our rights are.
Including, the Roe, of course, is getting the most of the attention because of the leaked draft overturning it from Alito. But we're also getting the probable tossing of New York State's 108-year-old law that says if you want to have a weapon with you at all times, these are the things that you have to do. You have to prove that you need it, and you have to prove that you can handle it, and you have to be licensed. That's probably going to be tossed, and we're probably going to see most states' concealed carry licensing laws tossed as a result, or at least challenged in court. The Supreme Court's about ready to make sure everybody can be armed more easily.
Yes, and then they'll suddenly be upset when one of those people shows up outside their house. Even though you can hardly avoid it these days, walking around in Washington, D.C., armed to the teeth. One of these justices has to live here somewhere. So, I don't know. But and they're going to act pretty quickly. The Congress is enjoying, for whatever reason.
Yes, Mitch McConnell is forcing the House to pass the Supreme Court protections today. The House should not have backed down on including protections for staff. Which they have done.
That's true.
Because McConnell had a hissy fit and said, no, this isn't intended to protect nameless people, because Mitch McConnell doesn't care about protecting nameless people, as we very well know, since he's fought off any kind of gun regulations for the past 3 decades.
Okay.
You don't want to protect those nameless school children.
No, those are losers. Even though staff at the Supreme Court, I mean, what are we talking about? Are we talking about everybody, or are we talking about clerks?
I think everybody. I think what the House wanted to do was everybody. And in fact, the far right has been circulating a Trump staffer has been circulating the name of one of the, I believe, clerks.
Great.
Saying this is the person who leaked the document. So in the far right cesspool, this person has been doxxed, has been named, and is probably being threatened as we speak.
Great.
But McConnell says, no, that person doesn't need protection.
No, of course not, because gimme-tarianism. We want the people we want, the people we like to be protected, and the people. Although, what if it turns? Well, I don't know who they're doxing, but are they blaming a one of the clerks from one of the liberal justices' chambers, or are they, okay, figures? Even though all the strategic analysis I've seen says it's equal or even better chance that it was a conservative attempting to hold the line on things. I don't know. They,
yeah, I think that won't matter likely to stave off
to the docs.
Roberts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, all right. We got to keep an eye on that. Also, I did notice, and maybe we can just jam it in there. I saw you wrote up something the other day on Mike Lee making accusations about Raskin. What's he doing? Yikes.
He is so awful. What was his latest thing? Mike Lee, who is lied. Mike Lee is a big liar.
Oh, yeah.
He was neck deep in this whole let's overturn the election thing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and has been lying about it, saying, "Oh, I never heard of the independent state legislative theory that these." Yeah, right. Anyway, he is throwing verbal threats at Jamie Raskin.
What about? Oh, okay. Well,
because Jamie Raskin said, maybe we should think about not having the Electoral College since it really is thwarting the will of the majority of the people.
And he's going to threaten him over the Electoral College.
Yes.
That seems unusual.
Here's Mike Lee saying that Jamie Raskin wants to overthrow the Constitution, wants to toss out the Constitution over the Electoral College when Mike Lee was arguing that states could throw out their entire popular vote.
Yeah, right.
He's a strict constitutionalist.
Okay. All right. Well, that sort of clears things up. I'm going to go and read that piece. I'll share it with everybody so that you can read up on it and just keep up on it.
Find out just how much of a puke Mike Lee is.
Yeah, I like the use of the word, too. It's been some time since I've heard anybody called that. Okay. Well, I'm glad we were able to catch up with you at last.
So am I, and my apologies for being such a
problem at all.
Poor correspondent.
Not at all. Okay, well, we appreciate all the time we get with you. In fact, I'll ask you for some more next week, if you'd be willing.
From netrootsradio.com.
All right, take care, Joan. We'll see you then.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, time for us to wrap things up, of course, and hand it all over to Justice Putnam with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. After speaking very easily to our West Coast now correspondent, Joan, thanks very much for coming by. Stay tuned, of course, for, let's see, bad news in the crypto world, or maybe good news. Hang on.